Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pada Padme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So we continue from where we left last. In our last class, we had discussed about the gossip that was taking place in Jairambati, which was typical of rural women in those days. And that saddened Sharada because she was young, she had no way to find out what was happening in Dakshineshwar. And typical of village women of those days, they whenever she used to go to take her bath in the village pond, they used to say, "Oh, here goes the madman's wife," because all of them, there was a rumor that Sri Ramakrishna was not behaving like a normal person. And then they would mock sympathy. They would say, "Oh, poor Shama Sundari, she has married her daughter to a madman. How sad." So the rumors were going on. And at home also, unfortunately, Shama Sundari, Swami, Srima Sharda's mother, she was a very guileless young woman, a guileless old woman. So she was lamenting. She said, "I've married my," she used to believe what the villagers gossip, and also come at home and tell Sarada that I have married, I'm so sorry that I've married you to a madman. And then she used to say, "It is as if I've thrown her into deep water with her hands and feet tied." So this upset Ma Sharda. As we discussed in our previous class on the Great Master, where Swami Shardanji says that the human emotions and the human behavior of an incarnation is as important as the divine aspects. The visions, they're all glorious, no doubt. The experiences, the mystic visions. But we have to take into account that when they incarnate, it is as it were they assume human body and have the same feelings and suffer the same tribulations as human beings do. Otherwise, what is there to learn from these people? So Swami Shardanji took so much pain to explain the divine aspect of the Master, Sri Ramakrishna. So it holds true for Srima Sharda Devi as well, that unless these incarnations demonstrate to the people of the world how to deal with the situations, typical worldly situations, as would happen to anybody living in that age. It was typical of that age that there was so much of gossip going on, and people would unnecessarily create problems just by their sharp tongue. And some innocent people would succumb to those gossip, especially listen to that gossip and believe. Some guileless people like Shama Sundari. So she also believed, as Sri Ramakrishna's mother also in the initial stages, when the news came that he's not normal and he's having visions and he's behaving like a madman. So people who could not understand the state of mind in which Sri Ramakrishna was, and they would create stories and create situations here in Jairambati as well. And that upset Srima Sharda Devi because her mother also believed. And then she was stung by these remarks when Holy Mother, Srima Sharda Devi's mother herself says that I have married my daughter to a madman and it is as if I have just tied her and dropped her in deep water with her hands and feet tied. So she is almost as if she will drown in this samsara. So Holy Mother, now there was no other way because these rumors were reaching her own house. So the only thing she could do was try to avoid people as much as she could. So this is typical of, as I told you, of village life there. But as we discussed in our previous class, there are always a few wise people around. Though most of the people enjoy or they revel in all these gossips and other things, but there were some sensible people as well. And Srima Sharda Devi tried to seek their company. One of them was, as I told you, Aunt Bhanu. Bhanu Pishi, as in Bengali they call Pishi. Pishi means the uh, younger sister of the mother. So her mother's, though she was not a younger sister, but they used to call her Pishi, like auntie. So she was known as Aunt Bhanu, and she was a widow, but a very sensible and a very mature lady. She was very loving and sympathetic. She used to come and explain to Srima Sharda Devi, let them say whatever they want. We know, we have seen him, because Sri Ramakrishna had visited several times Kamarpukur as well as Jairam Bhatti, and they knew of so there were some people in the village who knew about his divine personality. And she had so much faith in Sri Ramakrishna, like Chinu Shankari had in Kamarpukur, that she believed that she used to tell, now and then come and convince Shama Sundari, your son-in-law is Shiva himself. And Krishna, Shiva and Krishna in one. Why are you worried? You people will not understand. Perhaps you are not able to understand it now, but you will understand it in the future. So, referring to this difficult time she had to face, Srima Sharda Devi used to say that she gave a wonderful solution. Now, this is how the human trials and tribulations which incarnations take upon themselves helps other people who are in a similar situation to handle it. So how did Holy Mother handle it? She says, she referred to this particular period in her life where Sri Ramakrishna, she was expecting that sooner or later Sri Ramakrishna would take her to Dakshineshwar and she would be able to stay with her husband. But there was no news from his side and she was patiently waiting. But then how did she spend her time? So she is giving some advice to young women who might find themselves in a similar situation. So she says in a later, at a later stage when people used to come with similar problems to her, she used to say, one must always be busy. That is the advice she used to give to young widows, especially young women. And she used to say, work keeps the body and mind in good shape. So, and she used to quote her own example. She used to say, during my young days at Jairam Bhatti, I was so active day and night and made it a point not to visit anyone's house. Because the moment she visited, she would hear this gossip and people thoughtlessly would make some remarks, and that would hurt her and her mother if she was there. So she just thought it best to avoid people and focus on the work, knowing fully well. Of course, she had a few sympathizers like Aunt Bhanu, who used to tell her that, don't worry, these people will not understand. Slowly they'll come to understand, but right now, don't just ignore this gossip. So, if at all she had to mix, and here people say that Shama's daughter, Shama means her mother's name was Shama Sundari Devi. So he said, Shama's daughter has been married to a madman. And she says, I just avoided people so that I might not hear such words. You see, sometimes, though one is very strong, the impact of the spoken words, there's a tremendous power in the spoken word. So we think karma is just by deeds, but even thoughts, words, and deeds can result in accumulation of karma. So whatever good thoughts we think, they may be subtle, but they are important. So also words. Even a casually uttered word can cause so much pain to others, and we have to suffer the consequences of those remarks. So she used to say one has to be very careful, even if it is a truth, or even if they think it is truth, because there was no way these village women would appreciate Sri Ramakrishna's divine yearning and his lack of interest in worldly matters. That was beyond their comprehension, beyond the comprehension of these worldly women. So out of ignorance, they might utter certain things. But here Sri Ma Sharda Devi is saying that even casually, one should avoid gossip. In fact, Latu Maharaj used to say, Swami Adbhutananda, it is always better to even just go and sleep rather than spend while away one's time in idle gossip. At least go and sleep, though it is tamasic to sleep, but still it is much better than hearing idle gossip. And that is what Holy Mother also advised through giving her own example. She said, I found it so irritating that even a person like Holy Mother says that I avoided people so that I do not hear these remarks. Those words do not fall on my ears. So consciously or unconsciously, carelessly or casually uttered words can create an impact for the better or for the worse in anybody's life. And the best thing is, if one cannot, one has if there is a chance that one can avoid, then it is always better to avoid and be in solitude rather than mix or socialize with such people. So she gives some very practical advice to young women, and she says that keep yourself busy. That way, working hard will never cause any problems. At least it will prevent you from this idle gossip. Later, she related to some elderly women devotees of her suffering during that period. So she is quoting now Swami Chetanand has compiled this book. It's a beautiful book. He has gathered information from different sources and also different reminiscences of Holy Mother, which were hitherto unpublished. They were not published because most of them were in Bengali. And so what he has done is he has collected all these incidents and put them in the proper place. So maybe this remark was made, it appears somewhere in the Gospel of Holy Mother, but then he found a context and then he inserted this paragraph here. So she related to some women devotees long afterwards, even I think this was after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna. One day she told some women who had come to her about the trials and tribulations, the suffering that she had to undergo when these gossip, these rumors were being spread all over Jairambati. She says that when I was in Jairambati, I was a mature young woman. This must be, I think, she was almost 18 when she first went, 17 years old. When she managed to go. She took a decision that enough is enough. Let me just go and find out for myself. These people are going on gossiping and telling all sorts of things, though I myself don't believe, but still let me go. And if there is even an iota of truth in what they are saying, then it's my duty to go and serve my husband. So with that attitude, she decides to go. But she says, what was the condition and what did she hear from these women who were gossiping? She says, she heard from them that the master used to rub his face. And this was true. There was a lot of truth, but unfortunately, they did not understand why he was doing this. Because no normal worldly person or no normal householder would do all these things. His yearning, his yearning to realize Mother was so great that he used to rub his face on the bank of Ganges and cry. Normally, people will think he's mad. He used to say, Mother, do thou reveal thyself to me? He used to shout, please reveal thyself to me. And when he did that, he used to literally rub his face on the bank of the Ganges and just uh, in that mud or that filth that was there, the muddy bank of the river Ganga, he used to just lie there like a madman. So naturally, people could not understand him that this was the result of divine yearning, and he was so restless, so keen to have a vision of the mother that they spread rumors that he had really gone mad. So when I heard this, now Holy Mother says this because these were not made up stories, these were the facts, these were facts, and they were related to her by many of the women, and directly or indirectly they used to come and narrate these incidents. But Holy Mother herself says, when I heard this, I was terribly hurt. But out of shame, I could not express my feelings to anyone. Seeing my tearful eyes, only Aunt Bhanu understood. And she would console me, giving me a hug and caressing my head, saying, "Why do you make yourself miserable listening to such useless gossip? Your husband is Lord Shiva himself. I recognized that on the very day of your marriage. Don't worry. You'll see one day that very madman will conquer the hearts of all. He's mad in the name of the Divine Mother. That's all. And that very mother will make everything right." So the villagers ridiculed but still continued. Though Aunt Bhanu used to come and now and then console Ma Sharada, they used to come and ridicule him and ridicule, complain, say, you married your daughter to this madman and all those things they used to say. But in Bengali, now Swami Chaitananji is quoting a Bengali saying. He says, the power or the impact of anxiety on one's life, agony and anxiety which one faces as a consequence of this kind of abuse of the spoken word. So Swami Chaitananji is quoting a Bengali proverb with the meaning of which is, the funeral pyre burns, but it burns the human being only once. But if one is, but agony and anxiety, if one is exposed to these, then they burn all the time. So it is like a slow death. It's like a slow burning. That is why in Sanskrit it is known as tapatraya. All the sufferings that we undergo is compared to burning. Tapa means heat. So when heat is a kind of extreme suffering, when fire burns the body, we feel the pain. So similarly, mental agony, anxiety, it's a kind of mental burning or mental pain. That is why it is known as tapatraya. Tapa means fire. Three means three types of three types of burning, three types of suffering: physical, mental, and you can add physical. In a physical, you can add spoken, verbal also. So verbal and physical, they all come in the same category. Then there is mental suffering, which is the consequence of the spoken word or something that you think, that hidden anxiety or agony that one faces. The fear of the unknown, the fear of the uncertain, it comes in many ways. Sometimes it is induced, caused by others. Sometimes it is a kind of existential fear or agony which comes from within. So we burn from without and within. That is what this Bengali proverb says, that fire will burn you once, but this agony will keep on burning. It's a kind of internal burning. The subtle, the fire of anxiety or the fire of agony that one person feels because of these things, gossip and other things. So Sarada burned with anxiety, and partly because of this overwhelming gossip, which was overwhelming her, though she was very strong, the people were constantly doubting and speaking about her husband's sanity. So that has some impact. no matter how much you avoid. Again and again, she herself says, she deliberated within herself, is my husband no longer the same person? Because a few years ago he had come here. In fact, we saw how he used to come both to Jairambati and Kamarpukur when she was young and stay for a few months whenever he got leave. At that time, he was so good, though she had heard these rumors even before. But whenever he came here, he was so nice, kind to her, so respectful. In fact, he taught her not only gave her spiritual knowledge, but also he taught her many secular things, as we saw in our previous class, how he was keen to impart some kind of worldly wisdom also to her, how to run a house, how to save money, how not to waste foodstuffs, and many things, many small things, how to use less oil and not how to be thrifty. So that was the training he gave, apart from the spiritual instructions. So she had seen that he was so loving and so nice to her when he came during his previous visits. But every time he went back, these rumors started coming. And then she used to wonder when she was constantly bombarded with these rumors. She said, she used to doubt. She says, I started doubting, is he the same person? People are saying he has become mad. Is this true? If this has happened by the decree of providence, now you see, as we discussed in the Great Master, Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Shardanji uh, discusses this for nearly one whole chapter, the human side, why incarnations assume, when they assume a human body, they undergo the same physical, mental, and other existential sufferings. It's not just that they are play acting. Though it is known as a Leela, it is not play acting according to Swami Shardananji, because if it were to be just play acting, then naturally people would say, oh, they are all incarnations and they are just playing this divine drama. But we are worldly people, we have these problems, we really feel those problems. So unless they take, it is a kind of self-imposition, these pains. And in fact, Swami Shardanji goes to say that the more noble a person, he first argues that a person who is a habitual liar or a habitual criminal, no amount of crime will will disturb his conscience. conscience. He goes on committing crime because he has a very thick skin. He doesn't bother. But he says the more sensitive a person who is uh, very ethical and moral in his life, leads a noble life. Swami Shardanji says his pain, even if there is a small mistake, he feels intense pain. If at all he commits some, if there are some moral lapses or something. So their suffering is more. So Sri Ramakrishna, he argues, Swami Shardanji says, that is why Sri Ramakrishna was so particular. Even by mistake, if he speaks some kind of, not untruth, but he commits himself verbally, then he goes, if he does not fulfill or does not keep his word, he feels restless, he cannot sleep. We know that famous incident when he said, I will come and collect, but then he forgot. Then he woke up at night and said, no, since I have promised Mr. So-and-so, the doctor, that I will come, he goes to his house, opens the gate and shouts, because they were all sleeping. But he was not satisfied. So such evolved souls, those who are really noble, the nobler a person is, the more he suffers. That was the gist of what we discussed in the Great Master, the talk on Great Master. So similarly here also, the Holy Mother, it's not that she did not feel the pain, that anxiety, agony because of these rumors. She felt it intensely. And that's why she says, if at all there is an iota of truth in what these people are saying, whether he's suffering whether he's mad or whether he's suffering for some other reason, my duty is to take care of him. So her patience reached its limit, and finally she decided to go to Dakshineshwar. She took a decision, though her father was not very keen to take because of this gossip. Even the mother was not very keen. They thought that she is better off here. But Holy Mother said later that it was March 1872 when she suddenly felt that now I should go. Enough is enough. To find out for herself what is going on. And so then finally she decided to tell her father. And she found that some village women, in those days you could not possibly travel alone. Either some male member had to go, her father had to go and drop her there. It was a very long journey. You go by train, you go by walk to Tarkeshwar, and from Tarkeshwar, if you have money, you buy a train ticket and go to Dakshineshwar. Otherwise, you have to walk all the way, and it would take 3 or 4 days. Though the distance was not so much, it was just 60 miles, but still one had to walk all the way. And I don't think they had enough money to buy a train ticket. So she decided, and most of the people who lived in the village, now and then they would go in groups to bathe in the holy Ganga. That's on some auspicious day. So there was some auspicious occasion in March 1872, and she heard that some women are going to Calcutta. So she also decided, let me go with this group. So she reported to her father, and in fact, she was so shy that all these years, all these months, she was not able to even request him to take her, because she knew it was so difficult. And moreover, if she goes there, will she be received there? What is the condition? So much of uncertainty was there. So she was suffering. But then once she asked her father, he was very happy and he finally agreed. He said, fine, I will also come with you. We'll go with that group. So it was sometime in the middle of March, Srima Sarada Devi decides, and these other women of the village, they start their journey to Calcutta. And as I mentioned, there were those days long. We had to cross very huge, large fields, and they were frequented by robbers. And that is what exactly happened. And this incident is very significant in her life. So people always traveled in groups. So in case some dacoit or some robber would attack them, then they could defend themselves. So normally people never went alone. They went in big groups. So, and except rich people who could use palki, who did not have to walk, it was a journey of about 64 miles. And they had to cross 5 rivers. You remember in those days there were no bridge. So they had to take a boat, wait patiently for the boat to arrive. And then the boat would take them across, then they start walking. So there were 5 rivers before they reached Ganga. Amodar, that is the village which passed through Jairambati. They had to cross that, then Dwarkeshwar, Mundeshwari. Then there was another Damodar, not Amodar, Damodar. And finally the Ganga. So travelers had to pass through several fields. Of course, they used a shortcut. They would not go by the normally go by the rail route, which would have taken them. There were shortcuts because it was a walking path. So they used to cross these vast paddy fields, and whenever they got an opportunity or whenever they were tired, they would, and they saw the huge peepal trees or banyan trees which were there all along the road, they would either rest under the shade of the tree, or maybe a roadside inn would be there and they would take rest. So for 2-3 days, this whole group which started walking sometime in the middle of March. They walked for 2-3 days, but Ma Sharda's legs and feet, they began to hurt. Naturally, she was not used to such long journeys. She had never, in fact, undertaken such a long journey. This was the first time she was going. She had never been to Calcutta before that. Every time it was Sri Ramakrishna who came and stayed here. She had never gone there. Moreover, this whole area of Bengal was malaria stricken. So mosquitoes would bite and then you would easily get fever within a few days if a lot of mosquitoes bit you. So she had a terrible attack of malaria, as was very usual or common, and she developed a very high fever just after 3 days. So her father Ramchandra Mukhopadhyay was very much worried. So he took, and she believed that we cannot go any further. So we'll take some rest in a wayside inn. And she was resting there. So after covering her with a chadar, with some kind of blanket, because malaria, very often, if those who have malaria, they know they get lot of, they shiver with chills and fever. So that is the one of the main symptoms of malaria. So he used to cover her with some blankets and then collect food and water. Very often these Brahmins, they would not carry money. So they had to depend on the generous bhiksha they got, the food that they got by begging from generous householders. So he went to collect food and water from somewhere, or perhaps they carried a little money. If necessary, they would buy some simple food. So she was terribly distressed. Holy Mother was terribly distressed because the whole company would suffer now, the company of women. So, but fortunately, she had a wonderful vision that night. This vision and the subsequent incidents show that they prove the divine origin. That is the first time she got a hint that it's Mother Kali is very much there, and she was her constant companion. That wonderful vision she had that gave her tremendous strength. So she says, she narrates that incident in her, let us see, it was narrated by her at, I think in the Gospel of Holy Mother it is there, that reference is given. So she is narrating her incident, and let us see it in her own words. She says, I was lying almost unconscious with fever, without any sense of decorum. Just then I saw a girl come and sit down beside me. She was black in complexion. I had never seen such beauty before, though the girl that came inside the house, it was a vision, but it was a very, very clear vision. It was not just a dream. She saw the vision, and in that vision, she saw a dark girl. Though she was dark, she was very beautiful. So she began passing her hand over my head and body. It was so soft and cool that the burning sensation of my body began to subside. So naturally, Holy Mother was wonderstruck by seeing this lady suddenly appearing, the small girl suddenly appearing. Then she asked, she never thought perhaps it was just a illusion or a vision. She said, where do you come from? Then she replied, I come from Dakshineshwar. Amazed, I said, Holy Mother quote, I'm quoting Holy Mother. She said, from Dakshineshwar, that's where I am going to go now. That's where I long to be, to see my husband and to look after him. But now that I have this fever, perhaps I shall never see him again. She was also afraid that she may not recover from this fever. Then the girl reassured her. She said, what are you saying? Of course, you will get to Dakshineshwar. As soon as you are better, you shall go and see him. I have been taking care of him there for your sake. Now, this is very significant. She is saying, not only have I come here to take care of you, but I am also taking care of him and his welfare for your sake. Then Holy Mother says, I said, oh, how good you are. Tell me, are you one of our relatives? Now, Holy Mother, though she knows perhaps she's seeing this vision, but it is so strange that they get a feeling that they are real. We find in Sri Krishna's life also, whenever she got a divine vision, she means Yashoda, the mother of Sri Krishna when he was very young. Now and then he used to play pranks, and sometimes he used to reveal his divinity, show wonderful visions to his mother Yashoda. But somehow she considered him to be a human being. She would become, though she had experiences and she would see these wonderful visions, somehow that memory was short-lived, and she used to forget and then treat him as if he is her biological son, and forget the divinity part, the divine part of uh, his manifestation. That is, we see very often in the Bhagavata and in all the other uh, descriptions of Sri Krishna. Many times he uh, showed his divine aspect, or maybe showed some wonderful visions to all the devotees, including Yashoda. But just after the incident, she would forget. So here also, she is seeing all these things, but it never occurred that it may be the Divine Mother herself. So she very innocently asks, "Are you one of our relatives? Why have you come?" She's thinking it's just another human being, another girl who is perhaps living in this village or somehow knows Sri Ramakrishna has come here. And that is why I said, yes. Then she answers, this girl, this black girl, she says, "Yes, I am your sister." So that is the reply she gets. Oh, then Holy Mother takes it very literally and says, "Oh, that's why you have come." And then she fell asleep. So she narrated this incident, that this is what happened, and I felt as if somebody has come, not only somebody, but a girl has come, and she reassured me that not only will you be okay and you will be able to meet your husband there, but I am taking care of him there as well. And I am your sister. So she perhaps in that state of mind, Holy Mother really thought that she is her sister, some relative. Many years later, again, Ma Sharda told the same story with more detail. So she has narrated this incident. This was just an outline she spoke, but on another occasion, she gave the whole, she narrated the same incident with a lot of details. So Swami Chetanand is quoting, has translated that Bengali reminiscence here. So one day, once when I was young meant she was hardly 17 or 16 or 17. I was traveling to Dakshineshwar. On the way, I was seized with high fever. I was lying unconscious when I saw a girl with a very black complexion and feet covered with dust enter my room and sit by my side. So perhaps that girl had come, and naturally, when you travel barefoot, your feet will be covered with dust, and the black skin, she perhaps noticed that. That's why she says her feet were covered with dust. And then she began to stroke my head. Noticing that the girl's feet were covered with, she still remembers very distinctly that the feet were covered with dust. Mother asked, as she would ask any human being, if some guest comes, the first thing that is these people, the host asks is, "Please wash your feet with water." Somebody, it's considered to be good manners to offer a pot of water for washing the feet before one entered the house. Normally, they would be traveling barefoot. So, Holy Mother, seeing the feet full of dust, she said, "Didn't anybody give you water to wash your feet?" Then that small girl replied, "No, Mother, I am in a hurry. I shall be leaving right now. I have, I have just come to see you. Why do you fear? You will surely get well." From the next day, this is how she described. She still remembered that this girl had come. She was not willing to stay longer, but she reassured her that you will be cured. And from the next day, slowly she started recovering. The fever also subsided. So the next morning, her father Ramchandra found that his daughter's fever had subsided. So he thought that it's better to continue than to stay here for long. He thought just now she doesn't have fever. So it's best that we continue our journey and somehow manage to reach Dakshineshwar. Then we can think about the treatment. And also encouraged by her vision, Sarada also agreed to go. Luckily, after going a short distance, they found a palki for her. Palanquin is normally carried by 4 people. The young or invalid people, they sometimes sit. People who are differently abled, if they cannot walk, or if they are old people, they used to normally travel in palki. You have to pay some money, but they will carry you all the way. 4 strong men would be there holding the 4 supports which were attached to the palki. So anyway, they found a palanquin for her, and though her fever returned a little bit, it was not so severe as on the previous day. So Ramchandra Mukhopadhyay said, he hired a palki for her, and then they arrived at Vaidyabhati, that is on the way, and then they took a boat to Dakshineshwar. So Sarada, her father, and other women reached the temple garden at 9 o'clock in the evening. As Sharda alighted from the boat, the robbers Amjad's incident is on some other occasion. We'll come to that later. But during the first visit, they somehow managed. And as Sarada alighted from the boat, she heard the master say to Hriday, now this is very strange, that Sri Ramakrishna, though he was so orthodox that he believed in certain auspicious times and hours of the day or the dates. So as soon as she got down from the boat, she heard her own husband, that is Sri Ramakrishna, telling Hriday, "Oh Hriday, this is her first trip. I hope the hour is auspicious." So it was, they were, they took so much of pain in those days. They would start the journey during an auspicious time or an auspicious hour on an auspicious day. And also they expected the people to reach on a particular day, especially when you come for the first time, when you enter the house, when you are coming to stay with your husband, it better be a very auspicious hour or a day. So he was worried, so he is asking Hriday, please find out if the hour is auspicious. The master's first words, laden with tenderness, were to encourage Sharda to go straight to her room. Her companions waited outside. After speaking these words, he asked her to, and very tenderly and very lovingly welcomed her. She didn't expect, because all she was told was that he's behaving like a madman. She didn't expect such gentle and nice, loving behavior. As soon as the master saw Sarada, he said, "Oh, so you have come. Very good. I'm so happy." And then he told someone, spread a mat for her on the floor. She and her father sat on the mat. When the master heard that he was ill, he expressed his concern, and in an apologetic tone, he said, "Oh, you have come so late. My Mathur is no longer alive to look after you." If you remember, it was during his sadhana, and also after that, even after he completed his sadhana, Sri Ramakrishna suffered a lot physically and many other ailments he had. But for Mathur Babu, who took care of all his expenses, medical treatment, everything, whatever he wanted, he was one of the providers appointed by the Divine Mother, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say. There were a few providers. It is in Bengali, it is known as a Rasaddar. Rasaddar means some guardian who takes care, who takes your care. Sri Ramakrishna obviously was depending totally on the Divine Mother. So he believed that the Divine Mother herself had sent a few people whom he identified as Rasaddas. The first was, of course, Rani Rasmani. The son-in-law of Rani Rasmani was Mathur Babu. Then later on, you will find Balram Bose, whose house Sri Ramakrishna. So Sri Ramakrishna normally avoided going and eating in anybody's house. He was very particular about the places he went, about whose food he ate, and all those things. He was very careful. But Balram's house was an exception, and that is the house he visited for more than 100 times. So Balram Bose was one Rasaddar. He believed that Balram's whole family, in the gospel he says, there are some families where a few people are spiritual, but Balram's very often, he told this to Master Mahasaya. In the gospel it is there, because when he heard that M's wife was a bit eccentric, not only eccentric, she was causing a lot of problems. The whole household, there was so much of quarrel and other problems were going on. And in disgust, M, in fact, had even contemplated suicide. So, that's why he used to say that you are only if you, he used to console M by saying, don't worry, most of the families are like that. You'll rarely find a few families here and there where every member of the household is a devotee. And then he goes on to say that one of the families is Balram Bose. So he believed that Balram's house, everybody was noble, devoted and spiritual. So he did not mind taking food in his house. So most of his Calcutta meetings in Bagh Bazar were held in Balram's house, where they say he visited for more than 100 times. That's the only house other than his own room in Dakshineshwar that he visited so many times. And we know, as the Swami Shardanji says in the Great Master, he was so keen. He knew many of the householder devotees who lived in Bagh Bazar area. They could not afford to come by boat, cross and come to Dakshineshwar, or come by boat to Dakshineshwar, or come by carriage, except for a few wealthy devotees. So it was out of compassion that he himself chose to go there. And when he went there, it was, you see, you should see Sri Ramakrishna's wonderful behavior, how lovingly he used to tell Balram Bose to invite some of the devotees. Like we had that, there was one, quite a few devotees, especially the younger ones, Choto Naren and other, who used to stay in that Bagh Bazar area. And he used to tell that he knew that those people would not afford to visit Dakshineshwar either by carriage, and it was so difficult after work, they could not come and reach Dakshineshwar on time and then go back walking all the way. So whenever he went to Balram Bose's house, he used to ask Balram, and he remembered every devotee of his who stayed nearby. And he said, why don't you invite Chunilal Ghosh was one of them, Chunilal Bose. So he used to say, why don't you invite Chuni? He was very fond of him, he knew. And every time Chuni Basu came to Dakshineshwar, so he would ask some of the rich people, said, see, in your carriage, just try to squeeze him in and drop him. He was so concerned, though he talked of wonderful things, he was so meticulous and so concerned about the devotees. So that's why, though they did not expect, Ramchandra and all, they were wondering how to approach and what will be his condition now, whether he will allow Sarada to stay here. So, and here Sri Ramakrishna is showing so much concern. He says, how I wish Mathur was alive, because Mathur used to do everything. So he knew that if now Ma Sharda would face so much of difficulty here, staying in Nahabat with nobody to help her, she would have to do all the household work herself, cooking and other things. He says, if my Mathur were there, alas, he's no longer there. alive to look after you. With his death, he says, I feel as if I have lost my right arm. That much he loved Mathur Babu, and Mathur Babu also loved Sri Ramakrishna. And during his sadhana, like a small child, he used to take care of every need of his. Whatever he needed during his sadhana and even after that, Mathur Babu used to take care. But then he had passed away and he was no longer there, and Sri Ramakrishna was concerned. So after the introductory conversation, he wanted her to stay at the Nahabat, where his mother-in-law was staying. If you have visited the Nahabat, it's a hexagonal room. I think it's just 8 by 10 feet, 10 feet. It's not a very big room, very small room, 10 by 10 feet. I think it's a 10 feet is the distance, and it was hexagonal in shape. And there was one room on the top where Sri Ramakrishna's mother used to live. She lived for a very long time. And as long as she was alive, though Sri Ramakrishna took sannyas, he told Totapuri not to disclose. He never wear Gerua in her presence so that it may not hurt her. She might get a shock seeing that. And every day they say he used to go ask about her welfare. He many times eat with her. Most of the time he used to eat with her till she was alive. He served her, and then he expected Sri Ma Sharada Devi wanted her also to stay there so that she can look after his mother. And that concert tower, Navat means a concert tower where they used to play these instruments just to wake up the Lord early in the morning. That concert Nahabat was normally used where they used to play some music in the morning. So, but she was staying there, the mother-in-law, that is Chandramani Devi, and he asked her to stay on the ground floor. The master said, then after that, suddenly he realized, no, you are sick, so you can stay in my room. You can go there later. First, he decided to send her there because he never expected to stay. But since she was sick and she needed care herself, he thought it would not be a good place for her to stay. She was so concerned that he said, it will be inconvenient for you to stay there and even the physician to visit. So he had taken a decision that he would take care, ask the physician and see that she gets cured quickly. So it was almost 10 o'clock at night. This is all narrated by Holy Mother herself. And the dinner was almost over. There was no cooked food available. At that time, Dakshineshwar was such a remote village that there were no eating places or restaurants nearby. So Hriday somehow went to the store and brought 2 or 3 baskets full of puffed rice to Sarada and her other companions. There were quite a few other companions as well, including her father. So anyway, 2 or 3 baskets of puffed rice was what they had to eat. That was a very common food, especially for breakfast. That was the only staple breakfast that they used to eat. So anyway, 3 baskets full of puffed rice was given to them for supper, and a separate bed was made for Ma Sharda on the floor in the master's room. If you have seen that the room in Dakshineshwar, normally there were 2 cots. One was a cot where he himself used to sleep. There was another smaller cot where he used to sit and talk to the devotees, which he did not use for sleep. It is a very narrow cot. But if some guests came, it was a very big room. So naturally, when guests came, like Baburam Maharaj and many of the Latu Maharaj, many of his disciples used to stay in, sometimes spend their night there. So he used to give them some bedding, and a separate bed would be made for these guests on the floor. So it was arranged, Sri Ramakrishna arranged that one of her companions would be there to look after her if she needed anything at night. Her father and other companions, they stayed in the Nahabat and other rooms in the temple complex. So Sri Ramakrishna made all these arrangements with such loving care. So Chaitananji says now that one can imagine what was going in her mind while she was lying in her husband's room. She had come with so much of anxiety, so much of pain and agony, was so many doubts were in her mind. She was wondering in what condition will I find my husband. And after coming here, Swami Chaitananji writes that one can imagine what was going on in her mind while she was taking rest in her husband's room with her companion. Although she was exhausted by the fever and the long journey, she must have been relieved to find that her husband was not insane. That is the first thing that convinced her. An insane person would not behave in such a loving and loving manner. He seemed to be extremely normal, rational, loving, and caring also. His cordial welcome eased her anxiety and uncertainty. And her godlike husband had not forgotten her. And he was as gracious and kind as she had seen him before in Kamarpukur and Jairambati. So she thought, for the past 3-4 years, I have been tormented by village gossip. The ignorant and the worldly people of her village had spread vicious rumors, taking up a few incidents that happened in Dakshineshwar and then unnecessarily creating vicious rumors. So, though she was tormented at that time for 3-4 years, she now realized that some good had come of it. And because of that, she felt that because of this gossip, I was in a hurry to come and it's good. Perhaps it was for my betterment that these things happened. This gossip, ultimately, it made me go or come to Dakshineshwar much earlier than she would have planned. So anyway, Sarada knew that she would have definitely been very apprehensive how Sri Ramakrishna would receive her. And she also had heard another thing, that he has taken sannyas. He had taken monastic vows from Totapuri. Though in those days it was so difficult to communicate. But the fact that he was initiated by Totapuri was known to everybody. It was hidden from his own mother. That's why Sri Ramakrishna said, I will not wear gerua. They say he used to wear a gerua loincloth, but externally used to wear only white dress, so that his mother would not know of his sannyasa. So, but Holy Mother knew, everybody knew that normally after sannyasa, a monk has to renounce his family and life. There are so many apprehensions. You see the whole situation, if we imagine what kind of anxiety and agony she would have had to face. So she knew that though she knew that he would be kind and loving as she had seen her before, she was convinced of that. She also knew that perhaps the monastic rules and regulations would not allow her to stay with the master. There were other anxieties as well. She perhaps expected to be rejected, and that would have been unbearable for a devout and faithful wife. So this apprehension disappeared when she found out that the master let her sleep in his own room and arranged for medical treatment and allowed another person to stay. So she at least got convinced that all my apprehensions were just, they were not necessary. I was unnecessarily thinking that he would behave in a different way. She was so much overwhelmed by her husband's love, compassion, and kindness that on that day she fell asleep. With good medical treatment after that and a special diet which Sri Ramakrishna had arranged, she recovered within 3 or 4 days. She still had fever when she went there. So in 3 or 4 days, she was fully recovered. Then the master himself, Sri Ramakrishna, supervised her medical care, diet, And then when she recovered, he arranged for her to stay with his mother in the Nabat during the day. But at night, she would come with her companion, sleep in his room. Now, Sarada was entirely reassured that there's nothing wrong with her husband. And immediately she decided, once she recovered, that it was her duty in turn now to serve the masters. Because after the death of Mathur Babu, Hriday, of course, was busy with his own work, and he was not, though he served him a lot, but still, uh, somebody had to serve him. So she thought, now that I've recovered, now I should start my duty to serve both the master and his mother. So Ramchandra Mukhopadhyay, Sharda's father, was very pleased by his daughter's happiness, and that is why he was free from anxiety, and he was wondering how would Sri Ramakrishna receive him. But now she was free from anxiety, seeing his son-in-law's wonderful behavior. He was reassured, and after a few days, he decided to go back to Jairambati. Later, in another reminiscence, Sharda herself told the devotees, the master, now this is very significant because she explains, it's not only significant but very authentic. So she says, the master thought so much about my welfare. These are her own words translated from Bengali. He always looked after my comfort and saw to my needs. What an intense love he had for me. People had circulated a rumor that he was mad, and my parents were anxious about me. Especially the mother, she felt panicky when she heard these rumors. Afterwards, they were relieved and happy, observing the master's normal behavior and his loving relationship with me. Ordinarily, now there is a discussion, I'll just conclude in 2-3 minutes. Ordinarily, people may they may wonder why Sri Ramakrishna did not bring his wife to Dakshineshwar earlier. Now, Swami Sharadanandji is explaining. Sharadanandji, of course, did not write Ma Sharada Devi's biography, but he quotes this, Chaitananji quotes this from the great master. So, Swami Sharadanandji asks this question in the great master. He explains why Sri Ramakrishna did not bring her to Dakshineshwar earlier. So, what did I'll just read this small paragraph, which is being quoted by Swami Chaitananji here, where Sharadananji is giving the explanation. He says, undoubtedly, an ordinary person, ordinary means any householder, would have done that earlier or brought the wife earlier. But Master was not such a person. This is what Swami Sharadananji says, that is his opinion. So he did not behave in that manner. Now he is giving the reason. Those who are accustomed to performing every action while depending solely on God at every moment of their lives do not make any plans. So he was just waiting, like Holy Mother. She was also waiting. She was not in anxiety. That is the greatness of this holy couple. They lived together, but practically both lived like monk. He lived like a monk and she lived like a nun. Even afterwards, throughout her life, if you see, she hardly got to see Sri Ramakrishna once in a day. And as we have seen in Sri Ramakrishna's biography, many times the only luxury she had to meet Sri Ramakrishna was when she brought food. She used to cook because she knew about her diet, and she used to carefully cook the food in Nahabat. And she used to bring the food. He would hardly talk with her. And this happened day after day. But after that, Lakshmi and the other Yoginma and many other women devotees who came to live, they deprived her of even that meeting. They said, we would like to take the food, because they also had their spiritual problems. They wanted Sri Ramakrishna's company. And she was not jealous or anything. She was very gladly, she gave whoever wanted to do some seva. So you see, this is how her attitude was. Throughout her life, if you see, this is the central idea that we see behind her actions. Both Sri Ramakrishna's, as long as he was there, and even after Sri Ramakrishna's passing away, she never planned anything, nor did he plan. That is what Swami Sharadananji says, that if you depend solely on God for every moment of your life, then you don't make plans. For the good of themselves or for the good of others, they depend on God's cosmic intelligence, the divine mothers in this case, God's cosmic intelligence, that's what Sharadanji says, and wait for a signal rather than resorting to one's own limited, puny intellects as we do. We think we are very wise. We want to plan everything. That's why when Swami Vivekananda came to the West, the disciples were always hurrying him, saying that we should do this, we should do that, and ask him to plan. And he used to get upset. He could not be made to take any decision in a hurry. They had infinite patience and used to wait till some signal or something, some sign, till he got some sign from Sri Ramakrishna that he was to proceed in a particular way. Otherwise, he was ready or very much willing to play the waiting game. So that is what Swami Sharadanji says, that they always depend on the cosmic intelligence, which intuitively tells us, it's a kind of intuition you develop as you depend more and more on God. And you wait for signals, then take hasty decisions. Of course, in a worldly sense, there is even the Japanese tradition. In the Japanese tradition, this method is used. They call it management by delay. I was very much surprised when I read it. It's based on some Buddhist ideas, where these traditional people who depend on Buddha's ethics, they call it management by delay. So there are so many books written by these management writers in Japan. They believe that if there is a problem, don't be in a rush to solve it. Just allow time. Time is a great healer. So they believe that we complicate things by trying to solve the problem in haste. We, in fact, complicate things more. So a prudent person, whoever, a prudent manager, according to this theory, they believe in a management system which is known as management by delay. Just by delaying, just by allowing things to settle down, many of the problems are solved. We saw Brahmananji also using, he was a great administrator. He used to just go in trouble centers which had a lot of trouble, where he was called upon to solve some problems, and just come and meditate, and the problem would be solved without even him asking people to come and ask them. That's the traditional way. We try to force our wills, use our intellect to solve the problems. But Swami Sharadananji says that, like Sri Ma Sharada Devi also waited for an opportunity, and Sri Ramakrishna also did not invite her. And in addition, Swami Sharadanji says that we can say that the master knew through his yogic vision, that through his wonderful intuition, that this was the will of God. This was the time when she had to come. Everything happens by the will of God. Even when he took sannyas, he said, no, I'll go and ask my mother. So he wanted to make sure that his desires, or whatever sankalpa or whatever thoughts come to his mind, have the sanction of the Divine Mother's will. They are according to the cosmic will. So Providence, Sharadanji says, Providence has its appointed hour for everything. After finishing his sadhanas, Sri Ramakrishna waited to share his hard-earned spiritual treasures with his wife. Sarada also waited for the right time, when she achieved her maturity, to act the next part of her divine drama, which with her husband. And it was, Sharadanji says, that as if Providence had set the stage for this act at the temple garden of Dakshineshwar. So we'll conclude now. We'll continue from here in our next alternate Tuesday class. Next, not this Thursday, but next Thursday we'll be celebrating Krishna Janmashtami. The puja will begin at 4 o'clock, but there will be some songs and other things, bhajans and all, from 3:30 onwards. And then by 7 o'clock, between 6 and 7, there will be a talk. Just after Aarti, 6:15, after the final puja, after puja, there will be Aarti. And there will be talk by one guest Swami who is coming, Swami Tyagarupananda. He'll be speaking on Sri Krishna, his life and message. So I'll be sharing this on WhatsApp. So if possible, any one of you, all of you are invited. It is on a Thursday. I don't know whether it will be possible, but whoever is free are welcome to attend this event. So there's one question which I'll try to answer. No, there's no question. Anyway, I'll take leave. We have already exceeded the time. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Oh, there's one question. Just let me see. Yeah. Somebody says we need more time for questions. You ask. Go ahead. Please go ahead. If there's no question, then yeah. Yeah. I agree with you that you have to think for a few minutes before asking. Okay. I'll wait. Yeah. Yeah, it is for Krishna Janmashtami. Somebody is asking what is the event. I mean, on Thursday, that is Krishna Janmashtami. It is according to the Bengali calendar or Vishuddha Siddhanta Almanac. It happens to be on 18th of August. Though in India, many places, some other states are celebrating it on 19th. So anyway, it is 18th and it will be at 3:30. Yeah. So anybody, I think in a few minutes you can type. Yes, there is one question. Okay, the Japanese management by delay, if a problem arises, is it wrong to think of a solution immediately? No, I'm not saying that. I'm talking of an attitude which people who have an intuitive understanding follow. That's all. I'm not saying that there are so many silly problems, small problems which have immediate solutions. We can do it. I'm not saying you delay every solution, but if there is some complicated problem for which easy solution is not available, then it's prudent to wait. When you are not sure of the solution, if you are sure of the solution, obviously you have to solve it. So that even the Japanese people believe in that. The people who want to who preach this philosophy, they say, yes, obviously, if the solution is very crystal clear, it's only when you have doubts whether you should do this or that patience or a little perseverance will help. And finally, you might finally end up with a solution. Yes. Solution, or you might get an intuitive solution. Of course, that it is a very secular way of looking at things, but here I am just comparing it with a secular philosophy, though this is far more deeper. The people, men of God, they have this intuitive power. They develop it and they know that it is always better to wait for an intuitive answer to our anxieties, our problems, and very often the solution comes. Yes. Our change, our thinking mainly about ourselves. If we change ourselves, we might find there is nothing much to change outside. Yes, this is a very important thing which Swami Vivekananda always said, the change has to be subjective. So very little we can do very little, or in fact, there is very little in our hands where we can change the external situation or circumstances. All we can do is to change our reaction. It's a very good point that has been made, that we can't expect the situation to change, the object to change according to the subject. It is the subject that has to change. So the subjective approach is the best approach. It helps you to find out a intuitive solution for your apparently external problems. Problems may be external, but it has some root somewhere deep within. So if we just focus, if we try to concentrate on the self within, that is what spiritual people do. They get the answers from within. They wait till they get the answers from within. Yes. Yes. In Janmashtami, of course, there is prasad. Prasad will be there because in puja, whatever we offer will be given as prasad. But it is the puja that is more important. Prasad is a byproduct of the puja. The spiritual ambience and the thoughts and the wonderful ideas, they are the subtle prasad. The gross prasad, of course, will be given. But that prasad, the finer the prasad, the better it is. The gross prasad will definitely purify our body and other things. But the idea behind the gross prasad is the attitude behind it, or the attitude with which the worship has been done. Very often it so happens that people fail to take the spiritual prasad with them. When they come, the idea is, and very often Swami Vivekananda, when he asked the celebrations to take place in Belur Math, he said, let there be less materiality, let there be more spirituality. This is an occasion when we should think of Sri Krishna, his wonderful life, wonderful message, the inspiration that he gave, that is very, very powerful, more powerful that, and more nutritious and more, it can sustain us more than any physical prasad. Of course, there will be physical prasad, but we have to learn that the greater, the more subtler the prasad, the more powerful it is. If we really want to benefit, then we have to start with the spiritual prasad, whatever we gain by our presence in the shrine, do a little meditation, try to think, because we are thinking of so many things. Why not on one day think of Sri Krishna, his wonderful life, how he solved the problems of life. At least during these 3-4 hours, 4-5 hours when we sit, we get a chance to think of Krishna if we are really serious. If we are really serious, we think of Krishna, we do his puja. Puja is just to keep our mind focused on Krishna. That's the main purpose of puja, not the rituals or not what we offer. But it's the mind, the focus or the concentration that helps us. And then later on we have a talk which should be the most important part of the celebrations. That is the most important part, because if the whatever takeaway we take, it's not the physical prasad that is important, it's the takeaway, the ideas that we get from the wonderful life and message of Sri Krishna, who saved so many lives. He solved the problems of Arjuna, and through Arjuna, so many other people around him. And that has been an inspiration for centuries. So that is the greatest prasad. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Yeah, there is a question that if one becomes a karma yogi, then there is no disappointment, because a karma yogi wants to get rid of the clutches of the 3 gunas. Yes, it's a good point. And naturally, if one becomes a karma yogi, then he is not bothered. Then he does everything. He does not even plan. Whatever comes to him, he does. Whatever he's supposed to do, he does not think beyond. He just takes the problem one at a time, solves it. Another problem comes. He's not tired because his mind is like Sri Krishna's, completely detach oneself from one's actions and go on solving problems. If they are solved, fine. If you are not successful for some reason, it's part and parcel of success and failure. They are part and parcel of our daily life. So that's fine. Yeah. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.